I'm old. I'm definitely old. You guys know my name, Brenda Johnson. Somehow I got roped into speaking by Dave and Steve and everybody. One of the things I want to make clear before I go any further, there's a lot of differing views on what is considered a cult, and by no means do I mean to say anything that possibly offends anyone, or there's a lot of different views on what a cult is. So I'm going to read to you what my favorite version is, because I feel like it describes the religion in a good, wraps it up in a good way. A religious cult is defined in many ways, but my favorite is a group of people that are devoted or have extravagant admiration for a principle and are controlled by an organization or an individual, in which family members are often removed and sometimes individuals are removed from their homes. So I mean, to me, in its own vague way, that describes the situation that most of us that were born and raised in the organization were led to believe. We were pretty much told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, why we shouldn't, why we can't, what's expected of us, and here's the ramifications if you don't do it. That doesn't leave an individual much choice. And that's why I never could understand when the Bible talks about free will. It's not free will if you're not given a choice, okay? So I was raised as a witness. My mother started studying when I was about 2 years old, and my dad was totally against it. My dad was heavily into gambling, pretty much gambled all our money away. My mom and dad had 5 children, so my mom tried to hold the family together. My father was raised in a very, very uneducated, poor background, and so he wasn't even really sure how to handle a family, I don't think. So he was opposed to the whole religion thing in general. My mom started studying, and he would go into the living room and he would sit and watch TV. And as my mom studied more and more, she said she could hear the volume going down, and he started listening. Well, then he got involved. He was made an elder. My mom was a pioneer. I was raised in a very small congregation where there was a lot of judgmental, self-righteous, backbiting, a lot of tension and stress going on within the congregation. And, I used to think that it was just mine, and that it was different elsewhere. And that's what people would tell me if I would talk to friends or family members that weren't in that congregation. I would hear, this is an isolated thing and it doesn't happen everywhere. And my dad wound up removing himself or stepping down as an elder. And one of the reasons was because in the congregation, some of the elders were hiding what this elder's children were doing, and this elder was hiding what this elder's children were doing. And so they were all covering each other. And there was just so much hypocrisy. He just had to step away, and he said, I can't do this anymore. My mom was a pioneer, and she had issues of her own. The whole congregation was basically riddled with problems. And I remember when my parents left, I think I was 15 years old, and I tried to hang in there for a little bit. And some of the younger ones in the congregation, when it was, in my opinion, about to be disbanded because of the problems it was having, we all got together and decided to start having watchtower studies on the weekends. And we would rotate to different houses. We would ask elders to come. They would all have some reason or excuse they couldn't make it. So there were a few adults that would come with us, and we would have the watchtower studies. Well, we had no idea. All of a sudden on a Thursday night, there's a talk that's given from the stage about how all the teenagers in the congregation are having so-called watchtower studies without adult supervision, and we were all basically reprimanded for that, and told that would not be happening any further. So that was the last time as a teenager that I went to a meeting. I left that night and never went back. When I was about 18, I graduated from high school, moved to Indianapolis, and was encouraged by my sister and a couple friends to just come to a circuit assembly. Just, they were all trying to save me from the path that I guess that I was on. In the meantime, when my parents left, I got heavily involved in the world and everything that it had to offer for a teenager at that time, which was lots of partying and lots of things that we weren't supposed to be doing. So I had kind of done what I think a lot of people do when they leave that tight rein religious hold. You go crazy. And so I had my years and years of going crazy. But I went to that circuit assembly, and unfortunately I got sucked back in. And we've probably all been there. So at that point, I started going back to meetings, wound up getting married because that was the right thing to do and what was expected to be done. I always knew that I loved women from the beginning. I remember being small and just feeling that being drawn towards women, not so much towards men, and struggled that way my entire adolescence, but I was from a small town where it wasn't even really necessarily acceptable there. So not only did I have that going up against me, but also the religious ties also. It just, to me, it wasn't even an option. This is what you do, this is the plan, this is how you follow it, because as a witness, we're geared towards that way. Just like the sheep, blindly following the shepherd. So that's what I did. He was an elder. I was part-time pioneer. Finally moved to South Carolina, and that's where the real trouble began. I had been disfellowshipped prior to. I'd been privately reproved several times for extracurricular activities that I never seemed to be able to stay out of. But at any rate, I went to South Carolina. In the congregation there, I met a sister, which a lot of you in the local chapter know, was the big controversy. We were friends, very close friends, for about 3 years, and her husband was a ministerial servant, and we got involved, and marriages broke up, and households parted, and it was a very big deal there. In fact, we were told at one point that there was a talk at a district convention about, sisters becoming too close and things that can happen and the issues that are involved. And, we were together for 8 years before that split up 4 years ago. So from that 4-year period, between that time and now, has really been the only time that I actually stopped and paused and took time to actually think about what the long-term effects have been on me. Because what I did was, I went from one relationship, which was a marriage that I was miserable in, even though he's an incredible individual. Kim knows personally that he's a great guy. He's a wonderful father. My son is so lucky to have a father as great as his dad is. But, that's not what I wanted. We're not here to talk about the fact that he's a good guy and that we were friends. This was a marriage, which is on a whole totally different level. So I have no issues or problems with him. But we split up, and when that happened, when Dana and I split up, it was like a big bottom dropped out for me, because what happened was it was an involvement with my best friend. And so I lost my partner of 8 years and my best friend at the same time. And Dana was obviously an ex-witness, so there was a big connection there. And there was some history. Dana and I both were extremely close to Todd and Richard. And Todd and I used to talk every day. In fact, he was the kind of person that he made you feel special because you were special to him. And that's how I felt with him. I felt special just because he loved me. So there's a lot of history there. So when we split, everything kind of got really nuts. And so everybody here said, come to Atlanta, just get away, move on with your life. And it wasn't until I did that I actually, like I said, took the time to spend working on what kind of residue was left on me from being in the organization. And one of the things that I think I learned the most about myself, and it took me several years to even get to the point that I understood it, was that I was a vulnerable individual in a very dangerous world because of how I was raised. We were never taught how to deal with people being dishonest, with people that did not have your best interest at heart. We were taught that everyone around us was like this big bubble that protected us from anything, and as long as we stayed inside that bubble, we were safe. But once we walked out of that, we were not trained for what was in store for us. I don't think any of us would have been. One of the biggest things that I feel that it left on me was it just totally stripped me of self-esteem. I had absolutely none. Zero. And I know most people that know me now and talk to me now, they're like, what? That's not something, the way a person would describe me, so to speak, but I'm not the same person I was then. And that total lack of self-esteem made me a very vulnerable person in a dangerous world too, because the fact not only was I here, or was I not only not in that bubble anymore, but I didn't know how to keep myself safe. And so what I wound up doing was getting involved in several relationships with individuals that took advantage of me, and that also didn't help my self-esteem. So what I had to do was I had to take a year, which is what I did, and just concentrate on me. No dating, no relationships, nothing. And to think about what was going on inside of me that was causing me to put myself in that position all the time. And I realized what it was that self-esteem issue, that it was gone, and that I had to do something to get that back. But how do you get that back whenever you're basically told and led to believe that if you don't go by what the standard is, you have no future? You have no future. You have nothing to strive for, nothing to work towards, nothing that could ever possibly make you happy. You're going to spin your wheels trying to make yourself happy in a miserable world. So how do you succeed when you have that in the back of your mind? It's almost impossible. So I guess where I kind of got to the point was where I thought, I'm not sure that God is even what man has made him out to be. And while the Bible is a good book that has a lot of really good thoughts in it and values that the whole society is based off of, I'm not sure that it is what people have made it out to be. So therefore, everything that I've based my life on and what I put myself in a position to use as a guide was maybe not the best thing for me to do after all. So I had to actually kind of like rewire my brain and help myself to realize that I do have value. What I think does matter. I am a good person. And while people would tell me that people are drawn to me, or that people like me, or that I had a personality that made people want to talk or to come out of their shell, I never believed that about myself because I still hated myself inside. So why would I ever take a compliment and accept it and help that to make me a better person? I couldn't do it. If you would compliment me, I would be like, oh, no. Oh, well, you're just saying that. That's what I would think in my mind. It was horrible. So once I took those doctrines and took those away from my life and said what I think matters, and all those good things that I could actually start thinking about myself, and trash all the things that I was told about me that were bad, because basically that's what we're taught to learn, is that we as individuals are sinners and bad people, and that the only way that we're going to ever be good is to follow these guidelines right here down this small tunnel. And if you take yourself out of that, what do you have? You have nothing. So you have to rewire yourself to think and to believe that what's here and here is pretty good. And I can make my own decisions, and I can make myself successful by going with those decisions. But you don't have to continue to hate yourself because you're not following what someone else is telling you to do or be. And you have to start caring about yourself. And that was my biggest problem. I had always been taught to care about what everyone else thought. You don't want to drink because somebody in the congregation might see you and be stumbled. You don't want to go to that movie because of this. If you want to see these things, or you feel that this is entertaining, or anything that went against what they were teaching you, you were a horrible person because of that, and you needed to fix it, make it right. And so I had to stop hating myself because I was told that I was bad all the time, and start loving who I am, because I'm just as good as anyone else, and everyone in this room is just as good as the next person. But you got to believe that, and basically, like I said, rewire yourself. And the best thing that I can tell people about moving on is start from scratch. Take all those things outside of your mind and start building from this moment on. Because until you let go, you're never going to move ahead with the new ideas and rewire that brain. You're never going to do it because it's always hanging in the background. I remember it was mentioned earlier today about the birds picking the bodies clean. Those are the kind of things you haven't. My brother was 10 years old when my parents stopped going to meetings, and my sister, who was a grown woman, married with her own child, told my brother he's going to die in Armageddon, and that horrible things are going to happen to his body once he's dead. And just, how do you take a 10-year-old child and tell them things like that without giving them nightmares? Or, it's just the mentality is so rough on our psychological being that, at some point you have to let go of that and just move on with the values that you've instilled here. Because what we learned in that religion, there were a lot of good things too. There's not all bad. There are a lot of good things that they teach you about your heart. So let that heart follow you from this point on and guide you, and not think so much about what happened then, because we've all been through stuff in our life, but you can move on from everything that happens to you and still be successful. So even though there's been a lot of things that, that I've seen, a lot of things that I haven't even went into that are far too personal to stand in front of a group of people and even get into. But it's not impossible. You can still let it go. And I know there's a lot of people here that are newly out of the organization. For me, less than 5 years is newly. Because I've been out for 12 years now. And it's just been the last couple of years that I think I actually got my head together. So, hang in there. Ones like James, Keith, you guys both. Keith, how long has it been for you?
13 years.
Mm-hmm. And then James, it's only been a few.
3.
Yeah. So, give yourself some time. But the only thing I guess I can really stress is someone like Todd, Richard, Steve, all the ones that were in the group that helped me when I first found the website. That was the biggest help to me, was to have the support that this group affords. And I'm one of those ghosts. You guys don't hardly ever hear from me. I just kind of hang out in the background. I meet up with the guys in the local group, and I've always stayed in touch with everyone, but that doesn't mean that along the way I haven't learned a lot. And that's why this group is so important to me, is because they were there for me when that time that I needed it. So we're all here for each other. So we have that special bond that'll never go away.
Now, if we could just get you to answer your phone and your emails.
Yes.
Yeah, good luck with that. I've never been very good at that.
I'm gonna have to call Kim now to get us a hold of you. 'Cause I know
Yeah,
where she works.
I don't answer for her half the time either. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But at any rate, there are people out there in the world that are good too. You know, a lot of them. You just have to pick the right ones. So, anyway, I didn't follow any of my outline or any of that stuff.